thank Heather and Cindy for what they just did on this stage and how phenomenal. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely phenomenal. You know, Heather and I both from Fort Mill, known each other for a long time, got older together in Fort Mill and have in common both having a very strong, amazing father. And I know he'd be so proud of you. But he's in heaven, so he doesn't care. He's good. So I think it's fabulous. And where's Cindy go? Yeah, all right. I just want to thank you. I mean, based on your childhood, you shouldn't believe in God or yourself, and you believe in both so strongly. So thank you. What an inspiration. Inspiration. So I'm going to continue what they started, talking about family and talking about happy holidays. And what does that mean? How do we define happy? What's the definition of happy? What is the definition of family? So George Burns has a great quote for his definition, and it's happiness is having a large, loving, caring, close-knit family in another city. All right? So I know a lot of people can really relate to that. They can really relate to the in another city part. But there's also a lot of people here who don't get to experience what it means to even have a loving, close-knit family. That so many of us here don't associate happiness in family. I define family as family means happiness occurs when your needs are met, particularly your emotional needs. You know I'm a psychotherapist, so when I meet with people, I'm very interested in their childhoods. And so there's two areas I will ask about, and that will give me credible information about their childhood and how they are today. And that is what happened in your family when you had a need, and what happened when you showed emotion. How many of you know what it's like to learn that emotions are bad and to shut down because of how you get treated when you show an emotion? So those two areas will tell you if your understanding of happiness is needs and emotions. So within a family, the only way to grow up is to be around supportive people. And the only way for that to happen is that you have to feel safe. There has to be a sense of belonging. You have to feel safe in order to get to the next level and develop. That normally happens in a family. As you know from your own experience and what you heard from Cindy and parts of it from Heather, not everybody has that luxury. Not everybody thinks happiness is associated with family. So I polled a lot of people on Facebook about when you think about holidays, what's your experience? When you think about family, what does that mean to you? And so I got incredible responses and very painful responses, but great responses. And so I just narrowed down a few of them, and I want to read those to you. I dread Christmas and all that comes with it. My dad was an alcoholic. Holidays were his favorite time to drink. I guess he could not deal with it, so he did not want anyone else to deal with it either. If he was drunk, we could not touch our toys until he was ready for us to do so. My first Christmas after my divorce, instead of doing the usual, my family, went to a soup kitchen in Rock Hill and served people who were in worse shape than me. I have family of choice today that I associate with, and I focus on what I have and not what I don't. Having lost a child, I always buy a gift for an unsuspecting child during the holidays. Incredible loss. And this, when I lost my first husband to addiction last year, even though the kids were 26 and 24, it was a terrible ending to a long, ugly struggle. We make sure that we do something in his memory for all holidays. And that's just a few of them. There's so much pain associated with this time of year for so many people. And there's so many people, as you can hear, have found ways to still stay in touch with themselves and God and not hurt themselves during the holiday season. And so that is what we're going to focus on, and understanding how important it is to feel included in a family and in a community. You know, my mission in life is to really help people feel included in God's love. My desire comes from feeling excluded from my mother's love, being incredibly rejected by my mother as a child and as I grew up. And when I got rejected by my mother, I also rejected God's love at the same time. Because if she didn't love me, how would a God I didn't understand ever have love for me? So now, today, I want people to know, because my story with my mother has changed. It's evolved because of God. So I want people to know that he's a God who restores. He's a God of love. And so in that quest of me understanding what happened between my mother and I, and being a therapist, I started studying how people attach. And there's a man named Dr. John Bowlby, and he is the first doctor, the first person who really decided and put together terms about attachment. There's 4 different types of attachment. So most of you have heard about secure bond, like you always hear about a mother wants to have a secure bond or a father with an infant. So whatever you experience as a kid about happiness and needs determines what type of attachment you have, which affects how you interact with your family and other people in your life. So there's an experiment that they did called the still face experiment. And so it would really explain how important it is when you need to be included, when you reach out and you have an emotion or a need, if it's not received or if it is received, what happens next to you. So this video I'm about to show you explains it much better than I can explain it. So I want you to take about 2.5 minutes to just watch this video and check out what happens.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm my good girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Isn't that amazing? That how many of us are still doing this? Have our hands reached out and we're waiting for somebody to hold us, waiting for someone to grab us and tell us that it's okay. Tell us it's okay to have emotions, to have needs. It's vital when we're kids that people reciprocate us, and if they don't, we will look many places for someone to do it. And so, for me, as you know, there was so much rejection as a child, and so when it became for holidays, going from a mom who would lock herself in a room and stay away from me to a mom when I was 18 years old told me she never want to talk to me again and stopped calling her, to have to go around her on holidays and see her, it was really difficult. And I'm telling you, I felt like David in the Bible. I felt like I was David going to fight Goliath. And the Goliath at times was mental illness, it was alcoholism, it was chronic disappointment, it was invalidation, it was trauma. But I had this one-eyed monster I had to go fight. And I still went for a long time with my hands held out, hoping that she would tell me I was good enough, that I was okay. And as I went through my recovery and I realized I just identified with David and that I had to go into battle and I didn't know how to fight that. So I know we all know the story from the Bible of David and Goliath, but I want to turn to that for a second and look about how that applies to where we are in our families. So you know that David was Jesse's son, and David was chosen to go and fight this Philistine. And so this is King Saul. And so the king comes to him and he says, King Saul put his clothes on David. He put a bronze helmet on his head and dressed him in armor. David put on Saul's sword and tried to walk around, but he was not used to the armor that Saul had put on him. How many of us know what it's like to be in a family, have something put on you that doesn't fit you? But in order for you to belong in that family, in order for you to be a part of, you're supposed to wear something that doesn't fit. It might be a role in the family, it might be expectations, it might be shame, it might be being a people pleaser. But how many of us would have to walk around with this heavy jacket that God never meant for us to wear in the first place, just because we want to belong to our family? David did something phenomenal. He said to Saul, the king, I can't go in this because I'm not used to it. Then David took it all off. He took his stick in his hand and he chose 5 smooth stones from a stream. He put them in a shepherd's bag and grabbed a sling, and then he went to meet the Philistine. What courage. He took off what didn't fit, what he could not fight in. He knew the mission God had given him, and in order for him to be in that battle and be the man he had to be, he had to have the right equipment. He couldn't go with the wrong equipment. And he spoke up to the king, the highest authority, and said no. How many of us have the ability to look at our families and say no? And we know what happens next. We know that David defeated the Philistine. He only had a sling and a stone, but he hit him and he killed him. He went in there with the right armor. He didn't need a sword in his hand. He needed one stone, and he took care of the battle. I think it took incredible bravery, and there's so much fear. So many of us have fear when it comes to our families and around the holidays. So I asked people, what's your main fear? And there's 2 main fears that people voice to me around this time of the year. One of those is that it will not be the same as last year. This is sad. This is tragic. There's so many of you. There's somebody who's not going to be at the dining room table this year. They're not going to be there. There's been death. There's been depression. Someone's incarcerated. Someone's in Afghanistan fighting for our freedom. There's been divorce. There's some reason that it's not going to be the same this year. That the people that you might want to be there aren't there. And it's also possible that you don't want the person there, but you're still going to miss them. That something's going to be different this year. And the second fear that was a huge fear for a lot of people is that it will be the same as last year. There's so many of us are caught in a pattern where we're still using the wrong equipment. We're still wearing the jacket that doesn't fit. And so we go in to battle and do the same thing that we've always done. And that nothing's going to be different this year. So let's talk about what's the wrong equipment. What works and what doesn't work. My little clicker's not really working real well. That's one thing. So one of the biggest things I see people do is that we get caught into a pattern that it's going to be the same as last year because we're in a pattern. And one of the main 2 positions people take is one is rescuer. We all know that person. who comes in and they so want to feel worthy, they so want to know that they matter to their family, that they will say yes to every request. They're going to cook everything, they're going to clean everything, and give everybody a ride, pick them up at the airport, whatever it takes for someone to notice them. And the other thing is the victim. The victim doesn't have a voice. The victim wants to say no and says yes, or the victim doesn't say anything. They don't have a voice. They're doing the same thing, shut down emotionally, hoping that somebody else would take care of them. And if you go into that pattern, there's a numbness that happens. And for a lot of us here, that numbness is alcohol, it's drugs, it's going around family feeling so obligated to be around them, so obligated to be wearing this jacket, that we're just paralyzed and we're there, and you just feel obligated, you want it over. You're not even going to remember the dinner or whatever happened. You just want to get through that day. The third one is denial. When it comes to family, what denial means is that I am unable emotionally to look at how my part helps you stay in your role. Within a family, that I'm having a hard time looking at what I'm doing that helps you stay right where you are. It's not where I want you to be. I want you to treat me better. I want you to be sober this year. I want something different from you, but I won't look at what I'm doing that could change that. We just want things to get better. We don't want to do the work. And when you have that, when you're in that pattern, when you're locked in and there's a numbness and you're in denial, there's a hopeless hope that will happen. You will just show up hoping that your uncle was sober this year, or your dad, or that someone's going to do something differently this year. And that is a hopeless hope. Do not ever put your hope in the sickest person in the room. The hope can only be for God inside of you. If He has shown you that every year your dad shows up drunk, it is for you to do something differently. Do not wait for them. And that's the final thing. The main thing I see people do on a regular basis is that they wait. They just wait. And this is what we're waiting for. The relationships which hurt the most are because we're waiting for the other person to change. We're waiting for them to see your pain. And we're waiting for them to notice that we are waiting. And many of you do this in a family. I've shared with y'all before that there's so many destructive behaviors I did in front of my parents because I just wanted my mom to notice and say, I see you hurting yourself. Obviously, I'm the cause. I'm so sorry. That makes no sense. If she had the help to say that, she wouldn't have done it in the first place. Stop waiting. So instead, we have to be able to go in with the tools that work for us. So what are your 5 stones going to be? What tools are you going to be able to walk in with? So in my family, sarcasm is our first language. We're all bilingual. Sarcasm first, English second. So humor is a huge thing for us. So even when, and this is what I've always described my family, it used to be what I called Operation Chaos. Things were just violent and crazy. And then it switched to Operation Cricket. And so what happens is we're all sitting around this really fancy, expensive table, and nobody talks. No one says, how's you running? How you doing? No one says, how's your ministry? Or my mom calls it a missionary. No one says anything. Everybody just sits there. So sooner or later, my niece starts making cricket sounds. Because there's just no connection. So we all just sit there. So what I do to get through that is that I decide on a sitcom. Like I'll pick Seinfeld, and I'll decide who's at the table is Elaine, and who is Kramer, who's Seinfeld. So I can just entertain myself in my head, just to get through the moment. Another stone that I highly recommend is to have realistic expectations. I can promise you, during these holidays, my mother will at least one time she will say, "Is that something a Christian would say? Doesn't seem very Christian-like what you just did." Now, nobody else in the family gets talked to that way. Everyone's a Christian, but I'm the only one that will somehow be judged for my Christianity. So this is my job. I know she's going to do that. I will watch her comment fall to my feet. It will not go with me in the car. By the time I get in that car, I'm Kim. I just left the Seinfeld episode. I'm good. All right? That is my responsibility. Her job is to be crazy. She does it and to be pretty. She does both really well. My job is to take care of me, not to hurt me because of her. That's my job. Third stone I recommend is that you have limits. My family's really good at this. And this is not an exaggeration, people. I wouldn't lie to y'all. You, I might, but the rest of you, I would not lie to you at all. My adult life, we have not spent more than 3 hours together. So it could be 2 hours and 59 minutes, and somebody will just stand up. And everybody else stands up, and you get your gifts, and you get in the car, and you leave. And that's it. I like that. 3 hours is good. Nobody goes to jail. Everything's fine. Now, I have watched other families. It's a 45-minute ordeal to say goodbye. They cry. They cling. I don't know what that is. I hope it's not contagious. I don't want that. That is not my family. Know your limits. If your mother-in-law expects you to go spend 10 hours on Christmas Day at her house and you really only can do 5, it's your responsibility as a grown-up, as an adult, to have 5 hours and to say that and speak that and to not worry about the consequences. Have limits. Adults have boundaries and limits. The fourth one I recommend are new traditions. This is one of my favorites. I will wake up Thanksgiving morning, and I'll be as excited as a little kid on Christmas because I'm going to go meet my best friend at Cracker Barrel, and we're going to pick a family at random and anonymously pay for their food. Now, Cracker Barrel's cheap, so it's good. It's fine. And then I'll go share it on Facebook, and then it'll become contagious. Someone else will do it, and it will keep going. I love that. That is me showing my Thanksgiving for how God's blessed me. I will tip my server a great tip because I will never want that job, ever. I would get fired very quickly. So I will award her. I love doing that. Another tradition that I started, a lot of you know I have a brother. He has 2 names now, Golden Child. And his second name is Jimmy, 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 because my mother gets so excited when she talks about Jimmy. She says his name over and over. Whatever. So every now and then, I don't have to do this every year, I have an only child holiday. I call my parents and say I'm coming over. And soon my mom's mentally healthy enough and lets me come over. So we'll plan this. And so it won't be for more than 3 hours, but they can't talk about Jimmy. I get to be an only kid for 3 hours. And that'll fill me up. 6 months, a year, whatever it is. I am in charge of that. It's not their responsibility. I get to do that. So, the fifth one is my absolute favorite, and that is, who's your daddy? All right? So, after David defeated Goliath, King Saul said to him, "David, who's your daddy? Who is your father?" He was so impressed with what he did, with how he defeated the Philistine and how he took off that jacket and picked up what worked for him. He said to him, "Who is your father?" I want to handle my family and my life experiences so well that somebody looks at me and says, "Who's your daddy?" And then I can tell them about the power of Jesus Christ. Then I can tell them who my Heavenly Father is. That is up to me. But I have to have this community. I have to have help in order to do that. We're going into a time that's difficult for so many of us. We won't meet in this room again until January. But we all have the same daddy. We are brothers and sisters. And so we still need to be connected for the next 2 months to each other. So I'm going to ask you to do a few different things. One, if you're sitting around your family or you're sitting by yourself and you're feeling lonely, I want you to tap your heart 3 times. Try that right now. Tap your heart 3 times. People actually listen to me. It's a miracle. 3 for the Trinity. 3 for the 3rd day that he rose. 3 for the 3rd Tuesday of the month that we meet right here as a family. That if you're at any moment feeling lonely, I want you to remind yourself that you are the heartbeat of this community. That's who you are. And I don't want anyone to leave here tonight empty-handed. Leave with a new phone number. Leave with somebody you can text or somebody you can talk to. That if you just texted me and said, oh, my family's driving me crazy, I don't have to talk to you on the phone for an hour. I'm just going to say, yeah, me too. That's all we need. We just need to know that we're going to get through this time together and come back here as a family and be a community. That we have extra stones that are over here that Lucretia mentioned, and pins for you to write. If you need to make sure that you have a certain stone, a certain tool, when you leave here, take one of these so that you are reminded of the community that you're in. Dr. John Bowlby here, I mentioned before about the still-face experiment. He has this quote, and I love this quote. Human beings of all ages are found to be at their happiest and to be able to deploy their talents to best advantage when they are confident that, standing behind them, there are one or more trusted persons who will come to their aid should difficulty arise. So many of us are going to have difficulty arise over the next 2 months. So many of us are still reaching out and needing someone to reciprocate and to reach out and be a part of their solution and stand beside them. We can do anything if someone stands beside us. There is nothing that you are going through right now, and I know the hardship in this room, that will overcome you as long as you let us stand beside you. That you're going to face Goliath over the next 2 months. But make sure that you have the stones and let us be part of that. Make sure you have the right tools. Let us be in prayer for you and be a part of what's happening. I'm going to ask Lucretia to come up and pray for you and pray over you so that we can make sure that you know when difficulty arises, that icuTalks, that these people, this family, will be standing right beside you.
Thank you, Kim.